celebrating the power of possibility.
I'm Lori Stryer, and I believe anything is possible.
Welcome to Anything is Possible. I'm Halloran Hilton Hill, and these are great stories about great people whose lives prove that anything is possible. You cannot reject the greatness that I am casting upon you.
I need you not to.
My guest is Lori Stryer. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm convinced you had a cancellation and you needed to fill me in. Thank you.
I have long been an admirer of yours, of course, a friend. And we were just sitting here prior to starting. We have known each other for 34 years.
It's crazy.
Isn't it?
Yeah, I came with the intention of just coming for 1 year. I was thinking about that earlier this morning as I was getting ready to come here, and I thought, oh my gosh, I came here for 1 year and I'm going on my 35th year.
Amazing.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's amazing, and I'm lucky. I love it here. So I made some good decisions along the way, obviously.
I'm going to start in an odd place, but maybe not an odd place,
Okay.
but this will be...
You're scaring me, Halloran.
This will be a little different.
Okay.
You can trust me with your
Oh,
story.
I do, and I do.
34 years ago when I met you, you were an anchor and reporter.
Channel 6.
I was a news reporter at WIVK in radio.
I remember.
And our lives were just churning up. We were just beginning.
I know.
You are now the CEO of RIVR Media.
Mm-hmm.
What a possibility, right?
Yeah, what a possibility.
Did you imagine?
Never. You don't even have to finish your sentence.
Really?
Never did I imagine, no. No, when I started out, my goal was to wind up in a larger city, anchor the news, and you know, have a family and live there, and never, ever did I imagine where I'd be today.
Well, here comes the first. I hope this does not make you feel uncomfortable, but I'm going to say this.
It's hard to make me feel uncomfortable.
I'm really proud of you.
Thank you. That does make me uncomfortable. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm
That means
really
a lot
proud of
coming
you.
from you. Thank you.
Because I've watched you evolve.
Yeah.
And it's just been beautiful to watch.
Thank you. It's been quite an evolution. Some of it by default and some of it intentional. So, yeah, and I'm very blessed. I mean, I kid a lot, but I'm very blessed to be where I am today and lucky to be healthy and be here with you. So thank you.
Let's start with this. When did you fall in love with storytelling? I have spent a lot of my life trying to understand story. Writing a musical, I'm writing a screenplay, and I love story and storytelling.
I do too.
When did you fall in love with storytelling?
I had not expected that question, but I think I have an answer. When I was at University of Georgia, I went into broadcast news, took a class in television production, and I had to do my first story, and I'll never forget it. It was about a vet who had a monkey, a macaque, and I had to tell the story how this gentleman brought this monkey home with him after he'd served his time. And I remember calling it The Macaque is Back. And I had 1:30 to tell that story because they were preparing you for news. You know, in news they say, go cover that fire or go cover this, you know, meeting, and they often give you 1:30 to 1:45. But even back then, Halloran, I wanted longer time. You know, I had more of the story. I did not like the idea of being limited. So I think it goes all the way back to college, that first assignment to tell a story. And when I told that story, I turned it in at 3 minutes and 20 seconds. They kicked it back, and then I came back in at 3. So it goes all the way back to college. It's crazy. And then I realized how much I loved to read as a kid growing up.
What'd you
but
read?
I read everything that my father read, so that I was kind of sucking up to my dad. So if he would read something, I can't recall how many books or what I read back then, but I loved to read. And then I just fell in love with television. And I loved reporting. I loved reporting more than I loved anchoring. I loved being out in the field, and I do to this day. Mm-hmm.
Is it the people and the stories?
It's everything. It's the people, it's the stories, it's the time frame. You know, back in news, you had a deadline. So you had to be back. I'm a little bit of an adrenaline junkie, and so I loved the challenge of getting it back in time, editing it, writing it back in our day. I'm going to pull you in with me. But back in our day, you know, you went out, you covered it, you know, then you came back, you helped edit it, you know, it was so different than it is now, I'd imagine. But yeah, I loved that aspect of it. The people, the adventure, the challenge of the time frame. I just didn't like being limited with time. If that makes sense. I had a lot more to say, Helen.
Possibility powered by Covenant Health, Home Federal, and the Knoxville News Sentinel.
Now you can listen while you're on the go with Anything is Possible, the podcast. Stream new episodes weekly wherever you go, wherever you get your podcast.
You've produced thousands of hours of programming for the likes of HGTV and TLC, and we'll go through all of that. But every one of those programs has a reveal. Mm-hmm. You have characters, they're doing something, and then it all goes wrong.
Sometimes.
And then it gets right. There's a
true.
reveal. There is character, setting, crisis, resolution. Those are the four pieces. Mm-hmm. So if we were to look at the arc of your life story, right?
Oh. Mm-hmm. I think I'm still revealing. And I think I'm still revealing.
Was there a crisis or turning point in your life that deepened you, that changed you?
I think there were several. I mean, there were some professionally, some personally. I remember when I was at Channel 6, my father was sick, and I'd gone down to Florida to be with him. And then, as it turned out, things took a turn, and my father was going to pass away.
How old was
he? My father was 78. And so I remember the newsroom back in the day, different management then, said you need to come back and anchor. You know, we don't have anyone to fill in for you on these nights. And I grew up a lot then, quite frankly, because then it didn't matter. And they figured it out, and they found somebody, but that was a turning point in my life.
That's big.
Mm-hmm. And then I realized...
I grew up in the adrenaline world of this business, and I burned myself by overwork, by saying yes too much, by not having good boundaries. It burned me in a way.
Somebody once said to me, Halloran, that the most empowering word in the English language is the word no. And so it took me a long time to get there. So I think I started on that date.
What other crises?
I think that was one of the biggest ones. It put it into perspective, life and what's important. Another crisis was probably when I was at RIVR Media that we have today. There was a slowdown, a stop down. You know, networks were merging. There wasn't a lot of work, and we had to downsize. And that was very, very difficult. And to this day, I pray to never go back there, but it was one of the hardest times of my life, quite frankly.
So let's look at your career then. You finish school, you start anchoring and reporting, and then you go to work for HGTV. My understanding is you were doing commercials and interstitials and that kind of stuff. Talk about that transition.
When I left Channel 6, went on to host a morning radio show called TK and Lori in the Morning, 97.5. And that just wasn't enough. I wasn't happy. I wasn't happy. And I thought, you know, I love film. I loved storytelling, as you said, and so I went to film school in Rockport, Maine, and then I came out and I was a script supervisor over at HGTV. I determined quickly that film is not my thing, especially for commercials, and it's just too slow. I need a little bit faster resolution. So I was just very fortunate to one day get a phone call from RIVR Media that said, we're looking for someone to help us create and produce a show that later became called Trading Spaces. And that's how I joined RIVR Media. It was in 1999. So I've had a bit of a path.
And that was a run right there.
Yeah, it's tough show to do.
Tell me about doing that show. Tell me about
it. Was hard. You know, nobody really sees the behind the scenes and knows how, you see the final product on TV. But back in the day, Trading Spaces, and for those folks that don't remember it, you had two homes, two sets of homeowners, and then you swapped houses or rooms in each other's house, and you decorated your neighbor's house and your neighbor decorated your house or a room in your house. And it was hard, back then. One producer, who was me, two camera operators that would follow me and follow us around. It was just a difficult show to do because you did a lot of running between the houses. It was hard, but I loved it because I was no longer at that minute and 30-second time frame. Stories. I was given a full hour, and so I loved it back then. I loved being in the field. Did
you see yourself growing into being an executive?
Never.
How'd that happen?
I have no idea. I think basically, so an executive, meaning where I am today as CEO of RIVR, I think I make jokes and I say it was by default. There were three of us, three partners at RIVR Media, and one retired, and then of course, Dee Haslam went on to,
Dee Haslam.
Yeah, Dee, she went on to, she now owns the Browns and the Bucks, and of course all of her philanthropic things that she does. She's an amazing person and continues to be my partner at RIVR. So I have a CEO title. I don't feel like I'm a CEO, to be really honest with you. I really don't feel like I'm a CEO. I'm not an office kind of person. I've had 9 offices that have been allocated to me over the years at RIVR, and I haven't sat in one of them. Like, oh, we'll put Lori here, we'll put Lori here, and I mostly love sitting in an edit bay, or I love being in the field. I more consider myself crew than a CEO, because I grew up in the field. I'm a field producer.
Now, take us with you with Anything is Possible, the podcast. Stream new episodes weekly wherever you get your podcasts.
You're a podcaster too.
Well, I'm setting one up. I was very fortunate to be home one day. My husband had a stroke, and thank goodness I was not in the field. I wasn't on a shoot. And he was diagnosed after the stroke with MCI, mild cognitive impairment, vascular disease. And it's been, and again, these are one of those moments that really helped shape me. And I learned a lot, and it put everything into perspective. So I've gotten very close with folks here in town. Also, well, actually, East Tennessee, many folks who are diagnosed with memory loss. And it means a lot to me. And so I'm setting up a podcast to hopefully help people, whether they're caregivers or people that have a diagnosis. And so I'm setting it up at RIVR, and we're going to launch it later this month. But I think Alzheimer's, dementia, I think it strikes so many people, and so many families are affected by it. When Bob got his diagnosis, I thought, okay, I'm going to need a therapist. And I went around and I looked for a therapist who could help me through this. And I quickly learned that nobody could really help me other than people that understood where I was, either that had a diagnosis or they were the caregivers of somebody. So I joined an amazing support group. And then one day, Bob, my husband, said to me, we ought to start a podcast and try to help other folks and talk about the latest trials, the medicines, et cetera, and just hear from people with a diagnosis. And I said to him, you know anything about a podcast? He said, absolutely not. He said, that's why I'm looking to you. So, hey, Halloran, I'm in the early learning stages, but it's very important to me. It's very, very, very important.
What are you learning personally? Because this is what love looks like in street clothes, right?
Yeah.
When the person that you love is going through something like this,
yes,
this pushes all of the glitz and glamour and CEO and
none of that is important.
It's just all.
You know, Halloran, I make that clear with the folks that I work with at RIVR, and I say, I mean, I know it's cliche, but family first. I truly believe that, and so does Dee. And we try to make it at RIVR where we have an open door, not an open door policy, but we really don't have hours like 9 to 5 or 8 to 6 or whatever. It's just come in, do your job, and do it well. Be great at what you do. But I honestly don't know how folks raise kids. I have a job, you know, take care of themselves physically and emotionally. So I think that's very important. And that's what I've really learned over the years. I was so driven for a long time. I mean, success and reaching the next level or the bigger city or having the highest ratings or the biggest show. And it's just everything gets put into perspective. And so, yeah, family first.
I think the future of humanity is being more human. It's just in my opinion.
Yes.
That's where it is. Talk about being a female executive. What's it like navigating this business? Because this business is rapidly changing, and the content space and the content business is changing so dramatically as people's viewing habits change,
Always.
the platforms they
Yes.
use, who's buying, distributing content.
Budgets.
And what's it been like to be a female executive navigating all of that?
What about a female executive who never had any intention of being CEO, couldn't read a P&L statement, all of that? I mean, you know, I've had to learn quite a bit. Somebody once said, and I loved this expression, to surround yourself with people smarter than you, than yourself. That's very easy for me to do, Halloran. I'm not meaning to be so self-deprecating, but I do have common sense, and I knew to put people into positions who were smarter than me, that knew what they were doing. So that's helped me navigate it. I mean, RIVR has an amazing CFO and EIC, executive in charge, and VP of current, VP of operations. So just so you know, it's on them. I'm kidding, but really, I mean, that was the first best thing I did, was to find great people. We're lucky. RIVR has tremendous partners in HGTV, A&E, Food Network, all of the networks, where as a woman, I don't feel any effects of that, to be honest with you. I'm treated fairly and very well. So it hasn't been a struggle being a woman in my industry.
That's awesome.
It's been great. That has not been an issue.
Are you tough?
Am I tough? I'm thick-skinned. I had to be. You know, in this business, I'm a creative. And so you turn in a show that you think is great, network looks at it, and they're like, no, try again. So when that happens to you, I've been doing this now at RIVR Media for 25 years, it makes you tough. You better be tough.
Thick-skinned.
Thick-skinned.
Here's what I've learned about thick skin. It has its attributes and flaws. In this regard. I've had to develop an incredibly tough mind, but it desensitized me.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Like
Now, give me an example. I don't mean to put you in the chair and make it, but I'm so curious.
I'm surprised when people are nice.
Oh, yeah.
And one day I was just thinking about that. I was like, wait a minute. I'm desensitized to a certain degree.
Yeah, interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
And it has affected what I expect from people. I don't expect people to be great toward me. What I expect is I will figure out how to navigate the tough stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you, having had to develop a thick skin, if your skin has gotten too thick.
I hope it hasn't. You know, I'm tough. I mean, I'm tough in that I have to be, to a degree, with what we deal with at work. And I'm never surprised when people are nice to me or kind. I'm so grateful, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just so grateful because I guess we're blessed. In this area where we live, in Knoxville, in East Tennessee, people are kind.
Before you go, I would love for you, imagine somebody looking and they're thinking about the possibility of their life. We've kind of taken a journey here. What have you learned about pivots and possibilities? Because you have to pivot a lot. You've had to change throughout your life.
All the time.
Right.
I think you have to pivot toward happiness. I hope that doesn't sound too schmaltzy, if that makes sense. I think you have to pivot toward family, toward friends, you know, and to what makes you happy. I mean, I think that's what I've learned the most. And it's hard. I told somebody the other day, and I think I even mentioned it to you, Halloran, somebody said to me, boy, isn't it great to own your own company and to run your own company? There are days, Halloran, where I would really just rather get a paycheck and go home, because I also feel very responsible for all the folks I work with. So it's tough. That's the tough part of it. But then the best part of it is when you succeed and you see folks. One of my colleagues just recently bought or got her daughter writing lessons. You know, they never thought that they could afford writing lessons. I have another colleague who paid off her house. And it's that, when I see that, it makes everything worth it. It does. You know, just seeing that we're able to provide jobs for people, and I'd like to think happiness. I'd like to think stability.
Wow. Well, what a great life you have produced and are producing. Thank you for being our guest today.
Thank you. I couldn't have done it without folks like you and all the folks around me, and that's the truth, really.